advisor for 5.0. What did you see that did well, could have done better, went wrong? General summary, takeaways helpful for other teams.
The most simple answer is that they got second at Legends, so realistically speaking, they did everything right. But obviously, there's a much more complicated journey to that. I don't want to speak on their behalf too much necessarily, but I think they started the year really well, like summertime and fall time, being ahead of schedule and stuff. I think what kind of fell apart for a little bit was after the fall comp, a lot of injuries, people being sick. It's, October, November time, it's cold. They didn't do a great job of, from that fall to winter time, keeping up the pace. It's hard to keep up. There's no comps. There's winter break. You inevitably relax a bit until comps in 2 weeks, nothing done. They had a lull period from the end of fall comp until their first spring comp. And they did have, like, I'd say, a rough week before that spring comp. A lot of practice hours because they were falling behind. One thing they did well, we kept saying this to them too, because basically 4.0 year was a lot of seniors. So all of them graduated, right? Like the captain, board, most of the board members, dancers. So 5.0 team was in theory supposed to be like a rebuilding team in the sense that half the team is left and almost none of the current guys had much board captain leadership experience. They had to go through that learning curve, those growing pains of what it takes to be captain. We had our own insight, but I remember saying specifically, before we left as captains, we as a whole team do the whole captains deliberations. Everyone like votes on the captains. Everyone on this team believes you, right? And like you guys were much talented dancers than at least when I started dancing. So even though I have this experience, I don't want to be in a position where I'm like micromanaging everything or like telling you exactly what to do. And we did have 2 successful years when I was captain, but we did not place at Legends. I can help you, but don't take my advice fully because you might just end up going to the same place where I did, right? Do better, then you should add your own input and advice. We had discussions about certain segments and like where the direction of the set should go. And I was glad that we advisors had opinions, but we're not at practice all the time. We only see what's in the WhatsApp videos on stage or what we hear. Captains are in the mix of all of it with the team. The vibe, are they stressed out? Is everyone okay? How much time is left? They have the best understanding of what needs to be done. So even though we had opinions, it'd be like I'd be like, okay, these are my thoughts, right? I kind of disagree, but these are my thoughts. This is not a command. Ultimately, believe in your heart what needs to be done. Stick by those things. There were some changes that they made that like we were like, why are they making this change? Like they don't have time for this. This is not going to work. But they pulled it off. They didn't take our advice for gospel. They heard our opinions. Maybe they said, "Screw you, we're gonna still do this anyways," and it worked, right? Like they really they like, believed in their own vision, and they knew they could execute this certain idea if they wanted to. I think that's the main reason for the success. Even though they had a rough time from like the end of fall, even going into that spring comp, they after their last spring comp were like, "We don't think this set is ready to win Legends, even if it was the cleanest set in the world. We're gonna make all these changes." Right, and that's usually a huge risk to make that many changes in a month, but they believed in all those changes. The captains love those changes, production loved those changes, the team loved those changes. So even when they had all those long practice hours, they were like falling behind before Legends because they made so many changes, and they were doing all those long practice hours. All those people on the team believed in the set. I don't care if I'm here till 3. I love this set. I'll dance this set. I have faith we're gonna place, and that my self belief, and they don't care about like other opinions, even ours necessarily, that helps put them in the category of placing because they're not bound to our visions or boundaries. One example is that when I was on the team for 1.0 year, we were crucified insanely for doing contempt. Like just even though after the first comp, so we had a contempt piece in our first year set, and we got critiqued on it hella. People didn't have the right technique, so it was like, okay, we're gonna work on it. We're gonna practice. This is the piece we're gonna practice the most to our next comp. Second comp, third comp, fourth comp, like every single segment, even though that was the most work, every single comp, even though that was the most worked segment, contempt was consistently critiqued. Junior year for the Masha comp, we had a segment that was like half Jummer, and then at the second half, people from the sides come and they do a little bit of like classical and not classical, like a little bit of contempt in the front. It's a weird vision. I don't know how to explain it. Like, we were like, let's test the waters with contempt. The issue was technique before. We tried to have 14 guys do it on stage. What if we just have the 2 girls and 2 dudes do it, and those 2 dudes are good at the style?
Which set?
It was in Tamasha. 3.0 year, the month
Yeah.
of 2022, the second to last segment, we put a few trained people and put it in, right? The judges hated that comp too. We got first, but judges hated it. It was like for my 3.0 and 4.0 year, we were like, we're gonna stray away from pointed toes as much as possible. Because it seems like whenever we try to do that, it's gonna fail. Right? We're just gonna get critiqued for it. It's gonna be a losing segment. Like we shouldn't take that risk. Because if we are going to take that risk, we need to do it properly. We need to train properly. We might not have the time for that, right? And I think a huge that's a huge thing. I at least looked when I was like, I don't want to have contempt of the segment because we're just going to get crucified for it. Like it felt like a lose-lose situation. What they did this year, the captains at the time that like who helped captain the infection set 5.0 year, they didn't go through that 1.0 year trauma of being consistently shat on by the judges for contempt. They were like, wait, let's just try it. Like, why? Like, it's a new dancers. We have Jay, who's one of the really talented dancers, been dancing since he was like 2. There's also girls in the team that know contempt. Let's try it. Let's train it. Let's see how it goes. And they on stage hit that segment perfectly. I mean, I don't know perfectly because technique, but that was a standout piece that impressed the judges. If they had listened to us, that segment wouldn't have been in, and they might not have placed. But because they were like, screw it, this is my perspective of what needs to be done. We're going to take that risk. They took the risk. It paid off, and is one of the pieces that helped secure second place.
How do you think when you get to Legends, what do you change and things like that? Figure it out.
I think two of the main difference between 3.0, 4.0 year versus 5.0 year was 3.0 and 4.0 year. We kind of had a competitive spring set throughout the season, but made the wrong changes going into Legends. And what we worried about almost is trying to not follow a trend, but okay. So for example, we kind of for Cosmos year that set was kind of like structured or was trying to be very similar to OSU's set Channel Chasers, where it's like very fast paced like a lead for like every a lead for different segments. There's no actual like proper storyline or like problem necessarily. It's like hype, entertaining, but it's fast paced, like short segments, fast paced. And we got a critique at Legends that said, "Oh, we're not. We added all these changes a lot because we're kind of following that method." And then at Legends, we got the critique that it's kind of too fast paced. Like we kind of took that we took that to heart too much, where it was starting to take away from certain segments in the sense that if you have so many segments in the set, then each segment's importance kind of like lowers, and you're not necessarily doing each style correctly, or if it doesn't feel as cohesive. It feels very like all over the place. And so we took that critique and we quite literally did the opposite for 4.0 year. 4.0 year, the approach was same thing. We had a really good set throughout the spring season, but we were like, okay, scrap the whole no storyline thing. We're gonna have a storyline. We're gonna have characters, a plot. We're gonna make a plot. So the sets are very different in the sense that one was like just a plan to the solar system. Here it is. Then this 4.0 year was like, okay, we're gonna create characters. Here's a plot. He's an up, down, villain, antagonist, protagonist, whatever. And we got a critique a lot during Cosmos year that we always had the energy of the hype and the entertainment factor, but not the cleanest team at the comp every single time. So we were like, okay, what we're gonna do is we're going to have a set. We're gonna believe in our segment that even though as a member on the team, we might get bored of the segment, we are gonna as a member on the team, we're gonna believe that it hits every single time because these judges that see it also see it for the first time, right? So they're viewing it differently. We shouldn't necessarily cloud our judgment just because we dance to the mix all the time, right? So we're gonna believe in our segment and not make as many changes. Just to keep it very clean. Have a nice hype. Have a hype segment. Have a hype set, and just clean throughout. Very minimal changes. Changes we should only make if something is really off. And then Legends, we made one big change with the stick segment. Didn't really work out because
Yeah.
it wasn't clean at all. People dropped sticks all over the place. It also didn't make as much sense, I think, to the audience members and stuff. So we had kind of those biases as people on the team, and as me personally as a captain of the team, that we did not we were focusing a lot on the judges' critiques almost and what other people would say more so than how we believed in the set ourselves. Like we were not necessarily taking the most um, holistic view of the set because when you're on the team, you're gonna get bored of segments. You're gonna not necessarily have the same view as someone else who's watching it for the first time. So even though we changed the theme, very particular to the critiques that were given at Legends and like kind of took them to heart, that didn't work out. I think what 5.0 did was their changes that they made were not necessarily based on how other teams did segments. Obviously, they had some inspiration from other teams and what they did in like previous years and mistakes that they learned and stuff. But we did not do what they did, which is make the changes that you believe in, right? If you like these changes and you execute them well, they're gonna hit. You shouldn't have to worry about, oh, they might say this, they might talk about this. And I think that's kind of why we didn't place it Legends, because we were not necessarily dancing we were like dancing for the rubric too much that 4.0 year. We were like, okay, we're gonna be clean, clean, clean. We didn't add the right changes, add the more hype that we wanted to. We were trying to be very like beat the system. It didn't work out. But like for these guys last year, it did work out. For 3.0 and 4.0 year, very successful spring season and changes at Legends. For 5.0 year, rough start, like you see on Confessions. After that Minza performance, it didn't look as inspiring as previous Talaash performances. And people were like, oh, how did Talaash even place third? Whatever, that's like a different conversation. But they had a rough start, and even after some of the changes they made, people like, on the team or even outside the team were like, this story still doesn't make sense. This story is not hype. This is not working out. That last month, specifically the last 2 weeks before Legends, was a game changer. They went from a team that made Legends just because they got the ELO to a team that was going to compete for the top three. And I think it goes to show that like the progress throughout a set, the progress throughout a year isn't linear. Another example is Buckeye Fusion, my junior year. Their first comp was Jhalak, and I was a liaison for them around COVID time. A few girls had COVID, two tore their ACL. They had like hella. Their roster was down to 18 people, and they had to figure it out, right? And like they got six of that comp. It didn't go well. The morale was like kind of low, but then they pulled out the next three comps. I think like first, and second, something like that. And you don't have to be a team that gets it right from the start. There is a way to pull yourself out of the gutter just because you had a bad start. I think like a team like Buckeye Fusion, they were able to pull it out. Like most teams and most people would probably call it quits after getting sixth the first comp. You know what? This is not the year. We've had hella injuries. It's been a rough season. Call it as it is. They pulled through. Similarly to last year, believing in their changes and what they did to get to Legends.
DDN is a great place to learn and a really great place to grow. Also, it has definitely caused a lot of tribulation in terms of being able to grow as a dancer,